Okay, guys, so let's get down to business. So, hello, everyone, once again. Thank you very much for joining us for this session. Feeling like some sort of a YouTuber or something, saying those things. So, so guys, once again, thank you very much for joining. For real. This is the second session out of eight. If I'm not yes, this is the second session out of eight. As I told you a couple of weeks before, we said that every single module would have two sessions essentially, and we said that this first module would be on a topic that we decided to call the project approach. So it was basically like an overview of what project management is. So we talked about let me just show it to you again because I've got it over here, but I skipped those slides just for you to remember most of the things that we talked about last session. So first of all, the first sort of subtitle on that presentation was what project management is and what it is not. So that's the first thing we talked about. We said, and that perhaps was the most important thing we said at the beginning, that a project is the work performed by an organization one time to produce a unique outcome. So those are two of the most important characteristics of a project. We said that it's something that happens only once and it has a unique outcome. So that's the first thing we did. Then we make a little comparison between projects, what a project is, and operations, and how being a project manager is not the same as being a manager for a company. You see, so that's the first thing we talk about. In the case of Gina, as you didn't have the chance to be with us last Saturday, we recorded last session, so we can share the link with you so we can have a look at all these topics and go in detail so you don't miss anything. We also talked about what managing a project implies. So we went a little bit deeper into it. And we also talked about the project process. And we said that a project has essentially 5 different stages: initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and closing. That's another thing we talked about that session. Then we talk about the value, and that was like the last part of it. We talk about the value of project management, and we divided that value, the importance of it, in essentially two different parts. First, the strategic value, so how project management can be a relevant or well valuable asset for a company. So why all companies, despite the nature of their business, might perhaps consider project management. So we talk about that. And then we also talk about the professional value of project management and how project management can somehow open new opportunities for those people who study it. So basically, we talk about those two things. And as I said before, the plan for today is to conclude this first module on the project approach, and which is also like a summary on the fundamentals of project management somehow. So before we start with the, let's see, this new part of the presentation on the session, I'd like to know if you guys have any comment about something we said before, if there's anything you'd like me to perhaps go over again. I don't know, any sort of comment, question, whatever, before we start. Nothing? You guys good to go? Okay, so let's do this. So this is the
I had a
first part
question.
of, yeah.
I had
Who's
a
that? Let me,
question,
yes,
Felipe. I had a
yes,
question
yes.
based on the reading that you mentioned, the suggested reading. And
Uh-huh.
it's about the difference between a program and a project. I mean, it wasn't clear for me.
Mhm. Okay, well, thank you for that question.
It's more like an example.
Actually, yes, the next week we will be talking about project management tools, and then it's going to be even more clear what the difference is. But we could say essentially that the difference between the program and a project is that a program has several projects inside, let's say. So a project is part of a program. A program is something more general. So for example, the case of Colombia Bilingüe from the Ministry of Education, that's a program because it has had several projects every single year, you see? So basically, programs are endeavors or are enterprises, let's say, that we formulate in order to accomplish big goals, and then we design projects to achieve that. programs quite often have always have a way bigger scope, because you normally formulate a program for several years. So for example, at a national level, every single government would have a program on several things. That's why you've heard about Plan Nacional de Desarrollo, and that sort of Plan Nacional de Desarrollo, for instance, could be a program for several areas, let's say. So programs are formulated for several years to achieve lots of different goals, and that's how they work. But in the case of projects, their scope is smaller, their time frame is also shorter, they are part of a program, you see? So basically, to summarize, projects are inside programs. We could say it just that way, you see? So programs are integrated by several projects at the same time. There you go. Okay, guys, so today we'll be talking, this is the first thing we're gonna talk about today, and that's the challenge of projects and the key reasons why a project is challenging to manage, basically. So this is the first question I'd like to make to you, and that's what kinds of challenges might we face when managing a project? So let me just have a look at something. So yes, that's the first question for you, and we'll be use this breakout rooms twice today, and this is going to be the first time we do it. So what I'd like you to do is just to discuss this question. Like when we manage a project, what kinds of challenges can we face? Like what would be the most common challenges to face when we manage a project? So let's think about, like, you are part of a group in a project, and you are going to develop it. What kinds of challenges would be more common to face? So that's what I'd like you guys to discuss about to start. Okay, so we're gonna go with the breakout rooms, and you guys will be there for around 4 minutes more or less, and I'd like you just to discuss this, and perhaps to come up with at least 3 ideas on possible challenges that we might face when we are managing a project. Okay, so is it clear what we got to do?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, excellent. Do not forget to include all sorts of challenges. So it's not just, the most obvious things, but just think about the possible problems you might have if you are, managing a project. So let me just do the brief breakout rooms thing. Okay, let's do this like this. So here we go. Okay, guys, so we are back in the main session. So I'd like to know if you guys would like to share anything from the things that you guys discuss in the groups about the possible challenges we may have when managing a project. What would you say?
Wilfer.
Okay, sure. So we were talking about first comes the money. In terms of the money, could be a challenge because of the budget. It is necessary to hire people to have all the spaces. Integration in terms of reach agreements between all the people involved in the project. And what else, Paula? Can you remind me the rest of that?
Yeah, we were talking about budget, time management as well. Danny was saying something regarding the lack of communication among the participants, and the lack of organization, right? So, for example, we were talking about leadership, flexibility. So, to what extent that flexibility may come up with different problems in terms of communication, the roles that people may have according to the expectations. And we also were talking about, I forgot what I was saying.
Uh,
The fact that, for example, sorry, are you going to say something?
no, go ahead if you have
Okay,
the idea.
the fact that, for example, if the projects may have some alliances, as you were
Mhm.
saying, there are like programs, and then we got the projects. So the expectations of the I don't know, the other groups of people might be different to what you understood, right? So they might change their ideas, and they say, okay, now you have to do this because that was I required from the beginning, but you understood in another way. So it is
Mm.
kind of hard. I don't know if Danny
Okay.
wants to add something.
Yes, just to mention that the challenges can be in the inner processes within the organization and also external factors. For instance, when there are manifestaciones or things that can affect the agenda, uh, there are also challenges.
Absolutely, yes.
And
Okay.
Okay.
We
Thank you
discussed
very
about
much.
the challenges, the types of, for example, first of all, the time management that we can face in a different projects, because we don't know which kind of factors can affect my time management at the beginning and also at the middle of the project. The second one it was more related with the team working and with the stakeholders and the communication, and how I know and how I go deeper into know what kind of partners we have in a project. Actually,
Mhm.
it could be difficult at the beginning because it could be my friend, but I don't know like different like parts of how that person can work with me in different aspects and different skills. And the third one, it was more related with the specific scope that we discover in the specific objectives and
Mhm.
how to manage that specific scope, because at the beginning we face problems like put on a specific objective and like we try to put on a specific objective, and it can be difficult to separate that from an activity, or it could be more related with an activity and not a specific objective at the beginning.
Absolutely. Mhm.
So
Uh-huh.
that was our 3 points, four
Yeah.
points.
Yes. So far, you guys have mentioned two very important things. One related to scope and objectives, and that's why, once again, next week when we talk about tools for project management and we talk about the work breakdown structure, we will go in detail on that thing you mentioned about objectives and activities. That's very important, and also everything related to communication and time management, also very very important. And then, last but not least, Paola, Felipe, and Miguel were also in the group number 3. So what would you like guys to say?
So we find that, for example, the own disengagement can be a challenge for us because mainly in this case of education, we want to work. People can be reluctant to work with us, so that can be a challenge for us.
Mm-hmm.
We also think that the spectrum is better, something more beyond like COVID-19 in this moment, like pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
This, for example, we remember this that happens to you the last year about the crisis mode, that you had this problem with
Uh-huh.
Excel and those kind of things that
Uh-huh.
that can be the challenge for us too. And the last one is the communication effectiveness. That sometimes there can be many of a lot of misunderstandings
Mm-hmm.
in the team or with the audience or with the stakeholders. It's something that can happen a lot,
Uh-huh.
and we need to know how to deal.
Okay, I'm really glad all of you guys mentioned communication, as you will see. And when I was in the group with Mafe and Sebastian, I said, you guys save that comment regarding communication because we will say something very important by the end. So yes, communication is key. And as you guys mentioned, like expecting the unexpected, that's absolutely true. And that has to do with your capacity to mitigate risks and how to somehow anticipate them and can, you know, work on different ways to address such challenges. So here is a list of the according to the main source we have been using. That, by the way, I will suggest a reading from that book for the next week. There's a series of challenges, and I'll try to cover them all very quickly, but, you know, giving you an overview on the most common challenges we have with managing a project. The first one is something they call uncharted territories, and that has to do with the work, with the possibility of thinking that the work that you will do might haven't done before. So just for example, just a case of what we are doing right now with the Ministry of Education, like promoting the use of an application for formative assessment and use of data for pedagogical decisions. That's something we as an organization have never done here in Colombia, and no other organization has done the same. So this is something that might be a challenge every time you do a project. And think about the things that you've done. Think about the projects, the ideas you've had so far, and that perhaps if you read or if you try to look for information about similar ideas, it might be very hard. It might be very hard to find related information, so you feel like you are doing something absolutely unique or different, or that you don't know what sort of example to look at for developing your project. And even more, if you are looking forward innovating, that's going to be a very serious problem. So that's one of the challenges. So perhaps what you're going to do is going to be the first time you do it. That's something I'm experiencing myself right now, because I've had before some experiences with teacher training programs, and this year I have to do it again. But I don't know in this moment if I'll do it blended or fully virtual, and I have no idea what we're gonna do right now. So that's something that makes me feel quite nervous. But that's something that happens quite a lot. The second thing would be something regarding multiple expectations. So as you guys said, and this is something all of you mentioned, every single project has several stakeholders, right? And having several stakeholders means that everyone has different needs and expectations about the project. So for example, in the project we have with the ministry, we will be working with the ministry, but at the same time, local education authorities, Secretarías de Educación, will participate, and also the schools and individual teachers. So that means that all the people who will be involved in the project might have different expectations and needs. And as you guys mentioned, it's a real challenge to somehow streamline all those expectations and needs, and somehow offer everyone something they deserve or something they want. So having to manage expectations from different people is a challenge itself. Also, as you guys mentioned, communication obstacles. So first of all, as I mentioned here, organizational boundaries. So if you're working in a team for a project, and that's something we discussed last week, like one of the most important differences between project management and functional management is that the teams in project management or when developing projects are conformed just for a short or specific period of time. So that means that those people don't know each other, and then they have to work on that project. And perhaps those people don't know how the organization works at a more senior level, and that might be a problem. So as you guys mentioned, there are also boundaries or limits inside each one of the organization. So that's a problem, a very serious problem itself. So it's like how do we manage to communicate what we need to communicate to our team, but also to the organization and stakeholders? That's something very complex as well. Balancing competing demands. So the thing here is that we know that we have very specific constraints, and that's something some of you already mentioned. So the scope, right? So you have a scope, you know what you have to achieve, and you also know how much time you have, and you know how much money you've got as well. So you need to balance those different elements so you can make it happen, so you can make the project go, and you can deliver all the products and accomplish the scope you had at the beginning. So balancing those three things is challenging itself, like time, activities, and cost. So that's also a very important challenge. Another aspect of the challenge of managing a project has to do with the cutting edge characteristic it quite often has. Every single project, and this is quite, I mean, this is very common. Every single time we formulate a project, we are somehow assuming that we are innovating. You see? So every time you develop a project, you would never say, this project is exactly the same thing we did last year, we'll do it again. Absolutely no. I mean, every single time you develop a project, and if it's the second time, for instance, you do it with the same stakeholder, that stakeholder, even if that stakeholder was super happy at what you did the previous year, for instance, they would expect you to do something different. So even if you do a great job, your stakeholders, clients, allies, they would always expect you to do something different. So it's like your projects have to be cutting edge. It means that they have to always propose something new, something different, and are expected to do more with less regarding the strategy. So that's a very important challenge. Every time we develop projects, we are expected to do new things every time. So this is somehow very different to what happens sometimes in other fields. Like we've said that sometimes there are some teachers who teach the same during their whole life, you say. So they just repeat the first year of experience over and over and over, and that's like possible somehow. But in the case of project management, you cannot do that. You cannot do the same thing several times. You have to always try to innovate, or that's an expectation at least. This is another very important thing, which is quite related to the communication boundaries, and it has to do with the organizational impacts. So you may have a team. So for instance, let's say you're working on a specific project in the Ministry of Education or in the British Council. So you're working there, you have your team, you know what you got to do, you got a budget, some time established, and so in a scope as well stated. But every time you need to do something, you might require different levels of approval. So you might, for instance, say, okay, I think I can recruit a team of teachers in 2 weeks. I know I can do that, because you believe, and if you think about the things that you have to do, the activities you have to do, you say, I need 2 weeks to hire 20 teachers, for example. And it might make sense, actually, and it's like, it might be possible. But then you also have to think about the organizational impacts of that planning. So those 2 weeks can end up being 1 month easily, because you don't just hire people like that, but you need to follow certain procedures and something protocols the organization has. Look at this, this statement here. They say share resources. So for example, let's say Wilfer and Danielle, each one of them are project managers for different projects in the same organization. And Wilfer needs to hire some teachers, and Danielle also needs to hire some teachers. So they need to open a call, like una convocatoria, right? They need to open a call and then follow the whole process. But if they do it at the same time, chances are that the HR, for instance, the HR department in that organization is going to face some problems, because that HR department is somehow providing services to both projects, you see? So that's the point. Every time you're developing a project as in an organization, you're sharing resources with other projects. So that means that could affect your work. So that's why you need to know how the organization works, and you need to be ready to somehow compete for the resources or have access to resources like support services every time you need. Collaboration, and that has to do also with the way you work with stakeholders, and you have to be very careful, because when you're developing a project, there might be different relationships with stakeholders. So one thing, if it's an agreement versus a contract, the relationship is absolutely different. So that's something that happened to me last year, for instance. So last year I had 2 important projects. One was an agreement between the British Council, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Local Education Authority of Bucaramanga, and the other one was a contract between the British Council and the Mayor's Office of Medellin. So those projects were very, very different. The partnership was different because in the case of Bucaramanga, it was an agreement. Each one of the stakeholders, in this case, the three organizations, are putting some money on the table to develop the project. So we were like partners actually. So we are working together, right? But in the case of Medellin, it was different. That was a contract. So it's like the mayor's office is hiring us to deliver a project. So the kind of work we have there is different. So that's something we need to keep in mind as well, guys. Whenever we're developing a project, there are different ways of relating with the stakeholders. So that stakeholder could be an ally or it might be a client, you see, and that's different. That works in a very different way. Estimating the work, and that has to do with what you mentioned about the time, the activities, the goals, and everything. So estimating a project work is difficult because we might, for instance, do some costing right now and to estimate exactly how much money we need for a project for the next year, let's say. And then when we are to deliver the project next year, we might say that prices for things are completely different. So things might be a little bit more expensive or cheaper, and that's gonna, complicate things a lot. And that's why we say that the work of the project is often unique. So if we do a project this year and we want to replicate it next year, conditions won't be the same. And even less now with what's going on with this virus, for instance. This is a very clear example on how conditions are different. So that's why estimating the work is also a very complex thing. So this was, guys, for real, that was a revelation for me, because those of you who had the privilege of being in the practicum, one of the things that I talked about the most was the project triangle, right? And we always said basically this, that the project triangle was composed of the time, resources, or the cost, right? And the scope. But this is something I studied in this course I did with the Universidad de los Andes, just like, I don't know, like 1 month ago, more or less. And I remember that a professor in charge of the course, he said, like, what are the key elements of a project? So I was super proud because the rest of my colleagues, they were just quiet. And I said, I know. And then I said, time, scope, and cost. And he said, like, well, yeah. And I was like, that's the right answer, isn't it? And he said, well, not completely, because you're missing a couple of elements more. So basically, every single project has those three elements, yes, like the time, the scope, and the resources, or the cost, right? The thing is that they don't say cost here, but resources, because perhaps you guys have heard when they say, for instance, capital humano, right? El capital humano. And this is a not very accurate construction or idea these days, because when we are talking about capital, we're talking about something which is static. You see, that's the problem. Capital is static, like the money is static, it's there, it doesn't do anything by itself. So when you talk about capital, we are actually talking about things or the assets. But when we talk about people, we should talk about talento humano instead. So when you analyze organizations and you just know how they call that department, that gives you lots of information about the organization. So in some companies, they have like la oficina de talento humano or la oficina de recursos humanos. Those are two different conceptions on the people. When they talk about recursos humanos, they are counting people as an asset, but more like a static asset. You see, so it's like I have 500 computers and 100 teachers. Those are my resources, you see? And that's not pretty accurate, because you should make that division between the resources and, between the capital, let's say, and the talent. So that's why they talk here about resources in a more wider a way, like to keep in mind both things. So, okay, so in this triangle on the right, we have a more complete idea on these elements of a project. So we should say that yes, time, right? So the time of a project, yes, but also the scope and quality, that's different, you see? Because you might say, I'm going to design a 20 hours English course for teachers from elementary school, right? That's the scope of what I want to do. But when quality shows up, it means that, okay, what are the quality standards of that course? That's different, you see? It's not the same thing to say that you're gonna design a 20 hours course than saying, for instance, I'm gonna design a 20 hours course based on the Cambridge standards for blah, blah, blah. You see, it implies that you have a more clear standards, and that might, I mean, that's gonna affect your project necessarily. And same thing happens here with resources and cost. So the resources as the things you have, the assets, like the I'm sorry, it's the other way around. Resources as all the things you can use for the project, and that includes people, and cost as the money that you need to involve. So when we cost projects, when we make the charts, you know, these huge matrices with the cost of projects, we often have to divide the part of the budget which is just cash and in kind. You see, so it's like you can offer different kinds of resources or money to the same project. So it's like you can offer money, or you can offer in kind resources as well. So it's like the time of work of people. So that's why these three elements should be considered. And also expectations are right in the middle of that triangle. And that has to do with what the stakeholders want from the project. So this project triangle, as you can see, is way more complex these days. So guys, I'd like to know if you have any comment, questions so far about what I've said up to here.
Yes, sorry, I have a question regarding something that you were mentioning about scope and quality, and you said the example of, for example, Cambridge, and I mean, my question is, if the quality, of course, will be depend of the clarity, the clarity that you have in terms of the scope, but I don't know to what extent that those ideas will affect. Give me a second, I'm organizing my ideas. To what extent, for example, to be clear, to what extent, if we talk about Cambridge and that specific example, if I said Cambridge, and I'm going to focus only in Cambridge, might affect the uniqueness of the project and my like sharp the flexibility. I don't know if I am expressing myself in a correct way.
I can understand what you're saying, but there are two things to say. First, quality doesn't only depend on standards, let's say. Quality depends on the stakeholder expectations. So actually, when they talk about quality in project management, they talk, I mean, if it's like your project is of high quality, if you fulfill the expectations of all the stakeholders, basically. If you fulfill the expectations of all your stakeholders with no problem, your project is considered of high quality, let's say. That's what they say, essentially, talking about project management itself. But Paula was talking about flexibility and everything. But I don't know, I don't remember who in the last session you guys said, okay, we have to be flexible in everything. I think it was Danielle, if I'm not wrong. It was like, we have to be flexible in everything. But to what extent should we flexible? What is the limit of that? And then I said, when in a planning stage of the project, there is a moment in which you have to agree with your stakeholders the minimum standards, let's say. So we talk about a document they call Minuta del Convenio or Minuta del Proyecto, and that's a document that states exactly what you have to deliver. So it's like, yeah, there is flexibility, but there are limits. So it doesn't matter. I mean, we need to be flexible and everything, but from the very beginning of the project, you have you exactly know what you have to deliver, what you have to produce. So if we are designing a course based on Cambridge, whatever, from the very beginning, there's going to be a document with that information. So that's not actually open to discussion. It's like, you know that you have to design a course of 20 hours following this scope, and you have to do these materials and provide this guidance, whatever. I mean, that's something you know from the very beginning. So I would basically reply what I said before. Last Saturday. Is that the limit of flexibility has to do with the planning of the project itself. There will always be a document stating exactly what you have to do. So you might be flexible, yes, but there are some standards that you need to present. If you don't do that, that's going to directly affect the quality of the project regarding that. Your project is of high quality if it fulfills the needs and expectations of all the stakeholders. Okay? That's why they might say in that case. So now we're going to talk about, this is strongly connected to the previous part. So I'm going to explain this, and there's going to be another activity based on part of this information. And that's has to do with trends in project management. So this is connected to the previous topic because it has to do with the challenges, but this is related more with challenges these days. So what's happening today. So if you guys decide to start a career in project management, these are some challenges that project managers, let's say 5 or 10 years ago, were not facing. So this is quite new. So part of why this is important to understand is that if you understand these challenges and these strengths in detail, that's going to make you more competent. It's going to make you that's going to make you somehow stand out compared to other managers, let's say. So that would be the question, and I'd like you to answer this question just the way that you want here, and that picture is there for a reason, actually. So what is it like being a project manager today? What would you say if we compare it with being one a decade ago, for instance? So being a project manager in 2020, apart from COVID-19, of course, and being a project manager 10 years ago, what would you say would be the most important differences? Think about it. Just, again, take some seconds, I would say, and then you can answer this question. This is related to the challenges, of course, but it's not just about the challenges. Okay, Paula just raised her hand.
Maybe the way data was collected and analyzed. So nowadays, for example, we are trying to talk about big data, and I forgot the other term, but just regarding data and the way.
That is for true. That is for sure.
Yeah. The way at the end of the project, all the information is not only presented but analyzed through the resources that, for example, we have nowadays.
Absolutely true. Yes, that might be one important difference. What else would you like to add, guys?
With that, I would like to add something that you have to have a little notion or a knowledge of different disciplines. It doesn't only have to be your technical, our case, ELT, but you need to know just a little bit of other disciplines.
Absolutely, yes. Wow. Yeah. And when we talk about the key skills of a project manager, we will see what Felipe just mentioned. But yeah, that's true. And that's actually one of the reasons why studying this subject, studying project management is really interesting. You're gonna see a couple of things about that later. Anybody else wants to say something, perhaps?
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to. Okay, go ahead.
Well, just to, I agree with Felipe because actually in the past, let's say that companies, they had only a few departments, for instance, production and sales departments. But nowadays, you can see in a company there are multiple, and the diversity of the, let's say, what the customers demand. It makes that the companies try to think about all the aspects, all the ways how they can, let's say, improve their products. So you find different departments, and actually, and there are some, let's say, diversified chargers that makes leaders to work on this nowadays.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely, that's something we're gonna talk about as well. Yes, Miguel?
Yeah, starting from the point that we have different necessities, I was thinking about the impact and the reference that we can have from the international organizations, yeah, right now, because those could be like references that in a previous step we couldn't have. I mean, a decade ago. Like for example, la OCDE, el Banco Mundial, that could be like a good reference about the things that are currently happening or something like that.
Yeah, I personally believe, based on what Miguel has said, that's something we could connect with what Paula and Daniel said, and that has to do with the use of data, but also about the way we do team working these days. So the way teams are built and the way teams interact with each other, that's a little bit related to what just Miguel said, and absolutely yes, that there is no doubt that affects also the way we work and how project management is developed these days. So we could say that some of the most important project management trends to highlight are these. The first one has to do with managing vendors. And this is something very tough, let's say, because what are the vendors? Basically, you have to, and this is something we're going to go deeper on the next week, but when we develop a project, there are some cases for which, I mean, there are some activities of the project for which we need to open positions. So we need an administrative assistant, for instance, for the whole project. That's something we need. I mean, that's a role that we always need. But sometimes also happens that as we have some specific activities, it's not cost efficient to hire a person just for one activity. You see, so in that case, you would hire third parties, like with outsourcing. So we may outsource some services because it wouldn't be cost effective to do it ourselves. So we would outsource some of those services or activities. And we would also hire people based on different contract figures, like prestación de servicios, for instance. So what we mean by vendors, this word vendors includes lots of different things. That's the word in Spanish for it is proveedor. So we as project managers know that our organization may have access to databases with lots of vendors for lots of different activities. So for instance, I will have an event and I need someone to make pictures and make a video. So then I have to look at the database the organization has and the approved vendors I can select, you see? That's why previously when I was talking about organization overlaps and share resources and everything, that's regarding that. It's like if you have an event and you need a person to go and make pictures, you cannot just say, well, we have 1 million pesos for that activity. Okay, I will hire my cousin, right? You cannot do that. Even if your cousin is a magnificent photographer, you cannot do that because remember that you have to follow certain established protocols in the organization. And that has to do with managing vendors. Also, if you need teachers, if you need consultants for specific activities, you need to go to those vendors list. Or if you start a new process and you want to hire someone who is not an approved vendor for the organization, you have to follow another process. So you say, this is just one of those groups of administrative activities that we need to keep in mind. How we as managers know how to manage all the different people and sources to get the work done, you see? So that's very important. How do you manage contracts and services, goods and everything? So that's very important. It's something that is getting more and more sophisticated unless your organization is super corrupt and they will just hire people just like that. But in most of the cases, there are very serious protocols for that. Also, the selection processes. So, and that is regarding the previous thing. So one thing is to manage the vendors and getting the work done, but also is the selection processes. And this is a key word I'd like you guys to keep in mind. I will just put it here in a parenthesis by the end in brackets. It's called like this process. This word right here, guys, procurement. That's how they call it, procurement. And that has to do with, I don't know how to call it in Spanish, but it's like gestión de adquisiciones, if I'm not wrong. That's how they call it in Spanish. So it's how do you follow different processes to select the people who are going to offer you a service. So for instance, if you are going to deliver an online course and you need a Moodle provider, you see, someone who with servers and everything to allocate your course online. So you need to select a Moodle provider, and there are some protocols and processes to do that, and that's something that's getting more and more efficient as well.
Is it
Third
similar? Excuse me.
Yes.
Teacher,
Yes,
I'm
yes.
sorry. Is
Don't
it
worry.
similar to licitación? Maybe.
That's that we call it BIDS in English, BIDS, and it's related to it somehow, yes, because once again it depends on the rules of your organization. It depends on the rules and protocols of the organization. So for instance, every single time we pay a service, there is something they call PO, purchase order, you see, and every single service has a PO. It's a code number, it's a code that basically legalizes, let's say, the service. So let's say that I hire you, Wilfer, as a teacher for one of my courses, and I will pay you in three different moments. So every time you request your payment, you have to send this cuenta de cobro, right, with the PO number and everything. And depending on how much money I can pay you, somebody in the organization can approve that, for example. But in the case of licitaciones, we do bids or licitaciones when the amounts of money are very high, you see? So as the amount of money is so high, the process needs to be more complex and more, let's say, organized. So we make sure that we follow, we don't follow, we mitigate all the possible risks. So yeah, bids are related to this, but the bid is a different kind of process. Just to show you a contrast, if the amount of money you need to pay for the service is low, you just need a quotation, cotizaciones, right? Come on, little sister, what are you doing there? If the service is not very expensive, but if the service is very expensive, you have to have a bid, for example, you say? So those are like two completely different situations, but are related to the same thing. So Paula, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I just want to have a clear example. So I don't know if I'm misunderstanding the concept, and maybe it's connected also with, for example, when we got the root, right? And we got like those categories that you were mentioning, education, people who work from different technical services, etc. And as you were saying, when we got the pay according to our professional, the services we are offering, there are some protocols behind that require those kind of codes. So I don't know if it has to deal with, or could be an example for me, like just for me.
No,
The way I
root is a
understand the
completely
things.
different way, because in the case of root, and those are basically processes that you need to follow in order to justify your income and somehow reply any sort of request from the DIAN. So that's a process that you have with the DIAN, you see? So the DIAN knows exactly how much money you're receiving, and they can take it off you every single year. But that's a completely different thing. What I mean by codes here, it has to do with all the processes the organization has to fulfill, you see? I mean, all the things that the organization has to do to identify a need, select a vendor, and then work with the vendor and pay the vendor for his or her services. You know, that's what I mean. I don't know if I was a little bit clear this time. Okay. The next thing has to do with risk management, and that's something you guys mentioned actually, and that has to do with being able to expect the unexpected, as Gina said before in her group. So that's essentially it. How you're able to answer to possible risks that you may have in the future, and that's something you do also based on previous project experiences, for example. So yeah, that has to do with risk management. So projects and organizations tend to be more flexible and more efficient managing the risks, and for that activity itself, we have some tools that we can use, to anticipate the possibilities and mitigate them. The most obvious example in our field has to do with the strikes, protestas y paros. That's that's a very good example of one of the risks that we always have to keep in mind. You see, so that has to do with that as well. This is related to what Paula asked before, and that has to do with the quality management, right? So there is a more rigorous link with the quality management procedures and how we make sure we strengthen those practices and we know how to manage quality. So we make sure as well that the stakeholder expectations are fulfilled, let's say. So that's also very important, how we manage quality. The fifth trend is related to what Miguel and Daniel said, and that has to do with managing the teams. So these days we have to manage teams virtually, also in a cross-functional way, as Daniel said. So there are people from different departments in the same organization doing something for the project, you see? So you know that you have to interact with the communications department, and with the procurement department, and with the legal department, financial department, and very specialized departments, and you have to work with all of them. And you have to manage people from lots of different fields, for instance. And of course, you have to manage multicultural teams. So you have to work with people from lots of different origins, and that's something that necessarily is going to affect the work we do. Working with PMOs and corporate governance processes, basically, when we work for organizations that have multiple business units, it means that we are working with different levels, let's say. So just to show you an example. So in the case of the British Council, you know that the work we do in our field of English, it's done by a department who's called English for Education Systems. That's the name of the department that I belong to. But this department belongs to a wider area, which is called English Language, Education, and Society. So there are teams in lots of different projects, like in different areas, right? And all of these teams have the same head, and that head has the same boss, you see? So that means that the governance means that you are interacting with people at different levels, and you need to know how to interact with those different levels and how the organization works. So that's going to also affect your planning directly. Just to show you a very simple example, which is connected with the vendors as well, signing a contract. So if I need a teacher to work in my project and I need to make the contract for that person and I need to get it signed, I am not the person signing the contract because I'm just a manager. I mean, I'm a manager. I'm not the country director, you see, or as they call it, el representante legal, you see? So you need to understand the organization so you know who is the person in charge of signing contracts, for instance. So that's also a trend. Another thing which is also very important, and perhaps one of the reasons why most of us kind of are into project management, is that necessarily projects represent a change somehow. So the project manager is expected to be a leader for change. So it's like if you have an ally, or if you have a client who hires you for a project, they expect you to be a change agent. They expect you to be someone who's going to bring change and who's going to bring something new, and a person who knows how to do things and how to get the work done, you see? So you need to be able to actually do that. When we work on the theory of change, which is something we're going to do in the couple of next weeks, we're going to see exactly what that means, to know exactly that every single project follows a logic of change, and that the project is going to be good if we actually manage to push those changes, let's say. So this is one of the trends. We assume that projects are the result or are an agent for changing, or something that causes change as well. And I think this is the last one. Yes, servant leadership. And this is a little bit confusing for some of us, but it has to do with the kind of leadership we have. we remember, if you guys remember, and that's something I can show you right away, one of the differences we spotted when comparing project management and functional management, where is it? It's right here. We said that one of the differences has to do with the structures, which are less formal. Is it here? Wow, it's not here. I'm sorry. Oh my God, yes, it's here. So we said this, if you guys remember. So we said that regarding the authority of managers, like in operations, like in a company, in a normal company, the authority of the project manager is more formal. But in the case of projects, it is minimal, let's say, or there is no actual direct line of authority. So the way we lead our teams is different. The way we lead a team when we are a project manager is different. A project manager is not a typical, you know, like boss. That's not the way it works. So in this case, we need to know how to make things easier and how to collaborate and manage expectations. So the kind of leadership that we need to develop when we are project managers is quite different. One of the reasons, talking about the Colombian context, has to do with contracts. So as you know, one of the characteristics of contratos de prestación de servicios is that there is no hierarchy, no hay jerarquía en los contratos de prestación de servicios. Entonces usted no puede darle órdenes ni hacer llamados de atención a una persona que tiene un contrato de prestación de servicios. If you do that, that's against the law, basically, you see? So if I have a team of people, for instance, in my case this year, in my team, I'll have like 22 people. And just, wow, that's something just I'm reflecting upon in this moment. Out of those 22 people, oh my God, 21 have contratos de prestación de servicios. You see? So I am, let's say, the boss of only one person who is my assistant. But the rest of the people, I cannot do that. So the kind of leadership I have with them has to be different. You see, and the way I manage their expectations, because remember, your team is also a stakeholder. Remember that. Stakeholders is not just the company you work with or the ally, it's all the people involved. So that's why they talk about servant leadership, let's say, and it's how you are able to inspire action and how you motivate people without just telling them you have to do that, because that's not the way it actually works. So this, you know, these models of leadership are quite different. Okay, guys, so we just got to my favorite part of today's session, and that is the project manager, one title, many roles. So we're gonna talk a little bit more about the different things a project manager does. So to do this activity, we're gonna use a very great resource that I have downloaded from the mighty Tecnológico de Monterrey, which is called Cadena de Asociaciones. You see, so I really love this website I've got on Innovación Educativa at this university. It's just marvelous, believe me. And I've downloaded this tool that we're gonna use, which is called Cadena de Asociaciones. So I'm gonna explain in this moment what the Cadena de Asociaciones is, so you guys know a little bit more about the activity that we are expected to do in this moment. So let me do this. Give me 1 second. Yes. So I'm going to show you first the resource and the methodology. So when we use Cadena de Asociaciones, let me just see, how do I present this one here? Have never used this application before. Oh, should be here. Yeah. So it's in Spanish. So I'm going to explain in Spanish just in case. Listo. Entonces, esa técnica que vamos a utilizar, que se llama Cadena de Asociaciones, el propósito que tiene es de generar ideas de solución o generar ideas a partir de asociaciones entre palabras. ¿Listo? Entonces, lo que queremos hacer es básicamente hacernos un perfil de lo que es los distintos roles del Project Manager. O sea, el Project Manager tiene muchos roles y eso es lo que vamos a hablar ahorita. Son 14, si no estoy mal, de acuerdo con esta fuente. Entonces, vamos a dividirnos en grupos y cada uno de los grupos va a tener una parte de esa lista. Y la idea es que ustedes, porque la lista es muy informal, digamos. Entonces, las palabras así tal cual como están, es como que no dicen mucho. Entonces, hay que analizarlas a la luz de lo que es un gerente de proyectos y decir qué significa, por ejemplo, que un project manager deba ser como un policía, ¿sí? De eso se trata, por ejemplo. Entonces, ¿cómo funciona este ejercicio? Es muy sencillo. Básicamente, pues cada uno de los grupos va a tener alrededor de 3 participantes, ¿no? ¿Sí? Sí, pero, bueno, van a faltar personas, pero van a tener 3 participantes en cada uno de los grupos. Entonces, digamos, participante 1, 2 y 3, ¿cierto? Y las palabras claves son las palabras que yo les voy a dar a ustedes. Entonces, por ejemplo, participante 1 soy yo. Y la palabra clave 1 es police officer, ¿sí? Entonces, lo que yo debo hacer acá es decir, ¿qué significa que el project manager sea un police officer? Y tener como hacer un statement. Entonces, por ejemplo, digo como, it means that he or she has to control the team. Something like that, you see? It's like that's a kind of that's a kind of statement that you guys would write on that one, you see? So it's like you'll do it together. So you guys will do it together. So for instance, let's say we are in the same group. So, okay, the first word is policia. What do you think? And then everyone you guys can moderate the discussion, but each one of you is going to write what you guys think about that. So for instance, David said that it's because he or she has to control the team. But then Daniel said that it's because he has to manage time. And then Gina said it's because he has to tell people when they are not doing their job. I don't know. You see?
So
it's like,
sorry, in other
yes.
words, it's like basically assuming that role. I mean, regarding the concept
No,
and thinking from that perspective.
no. It's just saying what it means that a project manager is a police officer or a coach, you see? Es como decir, ¿qué significa que el project manager sea un police officer? ¿Qué
Only
significa que el project manager sea un coach? It's like you have to make those connections, you see? But each one of you could have slightly different opinions. So I'm going to show it to you. So you just remember, it's like you have maximum 4 words, and each one of you is going to do this in the format. I'm going to show you the words, for instance. So these are the words. For instance, the first list, planner, organizer, point person, quartermaster. Entonces, ¿qué significa que el project manager sea un planner? Entonces, Daniel tiene sus opiniones, Wilfer tiene sus opiniones, Paula tiene sus opiniones. ¿Qué significa que el project manager sea un organizer? La misma cosa. ¿Listo? Entonces, básicamente, a título personal, ¿qué significa? Pero la idea es como que cada uno se dé como la oportunidad quizás de tener una idea diferente. O sea, no tienen que tener exactamente la misma idea, sino que cada uno puede tener una idea diferente, pero ustedes hacen esa construcción juntos. You guys get it? Yes? So just give me 1 second because I need to do the breakout rooms again just to...
Only discussion, right? Or do we have to fill any format?
Oh, by the way, no. It would be better if you actually work on the format, but the thing is, let me just see if it's right here. So I got the PDF file on Drive. If you enter this location, Crash Course Resources, the PDF file is there, okay? And or you can also make a screenshots of the presentation. And I'm gonna just leave it there so you guys can make a screenshot if you will. Let me just do this. So here is the format, for instance. So let me just wait a minute. Here is the format. So if you want, you guys can make a screenshot in this moment. So this is the format that you guys are going to use. Have you got that screenshot?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. So that's the format we're gonna use. So okay, guys. So give me 1 second. Excuse me, I'm just... Okay, guys. So this is the way the groups are going to be organized. So give me 1 second. I'm going to just... Okay, guys, this is the way groups are gonna be organized. So this is very important for you guys to remember the words that you have to work on. So group number 1 is gonna be Daniel, Mafe, and Paula. Group number 2 is going to be Sebastian, Miguel, and I'll be with you guys. And group number 3 will be Felipe, Gina, and Wilfer. Okay, those are the groups. So each one of the groups is gonna have a different list as I showed you before. So, so this is what we're gonna do. So guys, these are the lists. So group number 1, this is your list, okay?
Okay.
So planner, organizer, point person, quartermaster. That's the list for group number 1. Group number 2 is gonna be facilitator, persuader, problem solver, the umbrella, and salesman. You see, and third group is gonna be coach, the bulldog, librarian, insurance agent, and the police officer. Group number 3 has got the craziest list of them all. Okay, so those are the lists. Okay, so just in case, guys, remember, each one of you was are set up in a different group. Seriously. So you guys have to get into that one. Let me just see. Why are you so? Yeah, so when I create the rooms right now, we're gonna devote around, let's say, more or less 7 minutes sort of thing, more or less, to do this, okay? Okay, guys. So ideally, I would have liked you to share your insights and all the things you guys discuss in the groups. But as you guys can see, we are running out of time. So I'll have to speed up a little bit just for this last part. Although we are about to finish, so don't panic. So here we go. Let me just see. So you guys had discussion and everything, and then what I'll do now is to go over each one of those definitions, and you guys just check your notes and just check what you guys did, just to see how close you were from the actual definitions. As I said, this is not from the PMBOK or like from the Project Management Institute. This is for a completely different book that by the end of the course I will share with you. That's a book that I'm using for most of the concepts and things that we are discussing in the course. So I'll share it with you by the end of the course. So this is just let's say a list of roles that serve almost like a metaphor of the things that you have to do in a project. It's not like an official thing, because it's clear that it isn't like using titles like the bulldog or the police officer. This is not very formal to call it that way, but this is just for you to have an idea of what it means. So the first one, the planner. Being the planner implies that you are able to, of course, ensure that the project is defined regarding everything you need for the success, right? And that that somehow you can project the work that you will do. So the characteristic of the project manager as a planner implies that this person can somehow think about the future and think about the things that he or she will bring, right? Regarding the stakeholders, regarding the work that needs to be done, the resources that they will need, and also all the processes that need to be executed. So it's almost like a capacity of thinking about the future and thinking about what you need for the project to be developed. That has to do with the planning itself. Some of you were asking a question about what would be the difference of the project manager as a planner, as an organizer. I would say essentially that for the first row, we're talking more about this capacity of seeing the future, let's say, more or less, thinking about what you need to do, actions, or what you need to do in order to achieve the scope that you have proposed. In the case of the project manager as an organizer, it has to do with how this person can use the work breakdown of the project. That's something we're gonna work on the next week. and determine if the project is being developed accordingly. We could also, to understand a little bit better the difference, we could relate it to the stages of the projects. So if we go back to that, if we go back to that slide, if we go back here, we will see exactly what I mean by that. So we know that there are different stages here, right? So the planner has to do more with the second stage, and even with the first one, but the organizer has to do more with this too, with executing and controlling, let's say, which are different processes, let's say. So yeah, that's how it goes. So we have the planner and the organizer. Then the third one is the point person. And the point person basically is the person who serves as the central point of contact. So if any person in the team has a question or has a doubt with anything, then the main point of reference should be the project manager. So if any, like the technical lead of the finance coordinator or any person who's part of the project should consider the project manager as a point person, as a person who talk to if they got any question or if they need to know something. This is very, very important. If you guys remember, we said that according to the Project Management Institute, one of the most important skills of project managers is integration. Here it is. That has to do with that, with the capacity we have to integrate the different members of the team. We also have the quartermaster, and the quartermaster has to do essentially with resources and with costs. So this person is the one who makes sure that we have the resources, the materials, and facilities whenever we need that, you see? So this person makes sure the team has what they need to deliver the different activities, you see? So that has to do with the quartermaster. It's a person who knows how to manage resources, materials, and facilities. Then we have the facilitator, which is slightly, let me just correct this. There is a little mistake here. And I'm a psycho with this thing, so I need to correct them. So the facilitator, it's a person who makes sure that everyone involved in the project has access to those other people they might need. So as it says here, he or she ensures that stakeholders and team members who come from different perspectives understand each other and work together. So the project manager is this person who makes sure that everyone in the team, despite their origin or despite their talents and knowledge, can work together, you see? So once again, this behavior, this capacity of integration, we can observe it here. The sixth role of a project manager would be the project manager as a persuader. And this is very, very, very important. And it has to do with the capacity he or she has to gain agreement from the stakeholder on lots of different things, like, I mean, every single thing. How you as a project manager can generate influence, how you can influence your stakeholders, and basically, like lead the strategy from that perspective. And that has to do with everything, with time, with cost, with quality, with the scope. It's like that capacity we have of convincing others. You see, that's very, very important. So this is very strongly connected to another role that we'll see in a moment, but it's your capacity to persuade, it's your capacity to convince the stakeholder. The problem solver is a person who know how to solve problems, also based on his or her experience and the technical knowledge. So is the person who knows how to solve a problem. It is as essential as that. So there are two things which are very important for that, and that's as it says here, the prior experience. So it's experience this person has of projects he or she has developed before, and also the technical knowledge that person has. You see, if it's a person who knows about education, it's a person who knows about educational technology and so on, he or she has the technical knowledge. And we'll see that this is also a very important area of development for project managers. We have the number 8, which is the project manager as the umbrella. So it's a person who works to shield the project team from the politics and noise surrounding the project. Guys, this is so important. So one of the challenges that we sometimes have to face when we are managing a project is that we need to resist the noise surrounding the project. I actually really like this definition, because actually, I don't know, but working on projects in Colombia in the public sector is full of drama. To say there's drama every single day, and this way was hideous. I mean, I really hated this week because it was week, there was drama everywhere. So me as a project manager, I need to be able to deal with those situations, protecting my team so my team doesn't suffer with that. So if I have to have any sort of discussion, if I need to negotiate something and feel uncomfortable with the stakeholder, it should be me, the person to do it, not my assistant or one of the members of my team. So I need to protect my team and face the stakeholder whenever it's necessary. So this is one of the most important roles of a project manager. The project manager should be a salesman as well. And as I said, this is connected to one of the previous roles, which is the persuader, and the coach roles, which we will see in a moment. This one is focused on selling the benefits of the project. So you have to be able to convince others that your project is worth the effort and the money. So you need to love what you do, essentially, and you need to believe in what you do so you can convince others that this is important. So it has to do with the discourse you have, for instance, the way you talk about the organization, the way you talk about the audiences, the way you talk about every single technical aspect of your project. So this is very important. I think you guys have seen how sometimes there are teachers or professors working for certain institutions, and they don't care about saying really bad things about the institutions for whom they work for. So they work in a certain university and they say, this university is a mess, I hate it, everything's just so bad, whatever. So this is an example of something a project manager should never do. Project manager should always try to make the work he or she does as good as possible, but he or she needs to always try to sell those benefits and serve as a change agent, as we said before. The project manager is a coach, so it's almost self-explaining, right? It's a person who needs to deal with different difficulties, problems team members might face. So this person has to be ready to listen to each member of the team and support them and like be there whenever they need. So the way you talk to your team, the way you relate to them, the way you organize time. So for instance, something we used to do a lot last year, the project in Medellin, was to hold weekly catch-ups. So the team would always have a weekly catch-up in which they would talk about they have to do during the week, in which they would talk about how they are feeling. So that's very important. So this is very important, and even more because sometimes when you are delivering a project, there might be moments in which the stress is a very serious thing. There was this other one which sounded a little bit funny, which is the bulldog, right? So it's the project manager as a bulldog is a person who ensures the commitments are maintained, issues are resolved, and actions items are completed. So it's a person who makes sure that things are done. So it's like we assign this work, this activity for today. I'd like to know if you did it, if you're having any problem. So it's a person who's ready para chancletear everyone in the team. You see? So it's like that activity somehow pushing, but not pushing like I'm gonna kill you, but following up, which is a little bit more like nicer. So that's the project manager as a bulldog. Then we have the project manager as a librarian. And it is because he or she has to manage all the information, communications, and documentation involved in the project. So he or she needs to know how to deal with documents in all different levels, you see? So all the figures related to the project, the numbers, and not just budget, but also the numbers in terms of audiences. That's something which is very, very important. So for example, in my case, I would always have a little notebook in which I would have all these numbers. So because that's something that happens all the time. So how many teachers are part of the project? How many schools, blah, blah, blah. So they would always ask about that. And you as a project manager need to have that information ready because you don't know exactly when they're going to ask you about that information. And if you need to know where the reports are, for instance. So that's a project manager as a librarian. The project manager as a insurance agent, and that has to do with the risk management, basically. So this person he or she is a person that also needs to be ready to identify risk and develop responses. So to see if something is wrong and think about a solution for those things. So it's a person who's always thinking about what might go wrong, and then think about possible responses for that. So that has to do with risk management. And last but not least, the police officer is a person who constantly measures progress against the plan. So it's a person who sees if what we are doing is what we plan. So it's a person who's always making that contrast. We said that we would do this. Let's see where we are. You see? So that has to do with an activity of controlling the actions of the project. So hopefully, I believe that perhaps some of you guys, or most of you guys, had a chance to answer correctly to most of these words. But good news is that the next section, which is the last of this presentation, would be like a summary of all of this, which would be a summary of all the knowledge and skills that you need to have as a project manager. So this is the last part, which as I said, is the key skills of a project manager, which is basically a summary of the previous information. So we could say that when talking about the key skills a project manager should have, and this is the last part of this first module, so it's like we want somehow talking about the skills of a project manager tells you a lot about what a project is itself. So the first one, and perhaps one of the most important ones, if it's not the most important, has to do with project management fundamentals. So the project manager should know, don't tell me, about project management. You see? So the project manager should know about project management essentially, and that has to do with all the skills and techniques that we use. So that's a specific skill. And once, in a moment, I will make a very important comment about this and why we can study project management and why it is worth the effort as well. There is another skill which is also important, or a set of skills which has to do with communication skills. And that's something that you guys mentioned since the very beginning. And that's why I told Nafi, just save this comment because we're going to talk about that in a moment. So communication skills are super, super important for project managers. Also, business management skills. So that's another set of skills that you have to be careful, because business management skills is not the same thing as project management skills. We quite often tend to think that perhaps they are the same thing. So finance, for instance, that's project management skills. I mean, yes, but not exactly. That's a separated set of skills, which is even more specific. Then we have the technical knowledge. We will expand each one of these skills in a moment to see exactly what it means. But this is where we are, guys. In this moment in our professional career, we have worked on this area more in detail. All of us. We have certain technical knowledge about bilingualism, language teaching, and so on. So it's like we have already worked on this area, let's say. And there are some others, as we can see here. And the last one has to do with leadership skills, of course. Project managers are necessarily leaders, so that's another part of the skills. So as you can see here, the size of this of these circles is there for a reason, because somehow project management is the one skills fundamentals. I mean, that area is the one that integrates the rest of them. Somehow that's a point of connection among the rest of these skills. So when we talk about project management fundamentals, we talk somehow about the science part of project management, because project management itself could be understood as a science itself. So it's a specific subject. You see, project management is not. I mean, there are no major programs on project management, as far as I know. So this is something that we studied after we have finished a university program. So you guys who already finished the university, those of you who are about to finish as well, this is one of all the possible areas that you could develop, in which you can develop your career, basically. So it's described as a science because, as I said, it's a specific subject. You see, so that's one thing to say, and that has to do also with software skills and so on. Then we have the communication skills, and that has to do with your capacity to communicate in written texts, also your oral communication skills, facilitation skills, presentation skills, and the most important one, active listening. You see? So there are lots of different things that are connected to communication, and we know what that is. So it's like, if you know how to write a report properly, if you know how to talk to an audience, you know how to have a persuading presentation, but even more important, active listening. If you are able to listen to the people that work with you, and how you translate that information they give you into decisions and measures. So that's very important, knowing how to listen to people. business management skills, and which has to do a little bit more with the operations. And we talked about that last week. So the budgeting, the finance, procurement, which I mentioned at the beginning today, organizational dynamics, team development, performance management, coaching, motivation. So business, remember, has to do not only with the money, but also with the talent, you see? So it's like that interaction between the different kinds of resources that we have. So that's another set of skills. And then we have the technical knowledge as well, which is what we describe as the experience and competence in the focal area. So in this case, the technical knowledge that we all have, we have technical knowledge on the same area, let's say, which is education and languages, basically. That's our technical knowledge. That's what we mean by technical knowledge. So that's something which is going to be always important. So it's like you are leading a team, but you also know what they are doing. So it's like you know how to provide a teacher with feedback because you are a teacher yourself as well. So that the technical knowledge is also very important. And the last part that has to do with the leadership skills. And those leadership skills are at least divided into two different things, which are the attitude and the mindsets. So that the attitude has to do more with the way you behave, the way you interact with others, for instance. But the mindset has to do with the approach you have to problem solving and get the work done. So that's also of paramount importance. So guys, this is a very interesting quote that I extracted from the book. He says, depending on the size of the initiative and the team composition, a project manager with different industry experience can bring tremendous value if they are strong in the other 4 skill categories discussed in here. So what it means, guys, is that if you develop a career in project management, if you become very competent project managers, there might be a moment in the future in which you could participate in projects in other areas, you see? So it doesn't mean, guys, be careful. If you develop yourselves as project managers, it doesn't mean that you would only manage projects in languages, not necessarily. If you are strong in the other 4 skills, you might be able to lead teams in completely different areas, actually. That's a possibility. And it's very surprising to see that sometimes those people who are, like really good in project management, they training or their academic profile is actually very surprising. So for instance, one of the best professors Universidad de los Andes has on project management is an architect, for instance. He's an architect, and he was the person who gave us this course. So you would say that makes no sense. I mean, you're an architect. Doesn't really matter. Remember, that's a completely different set of skills. So that would be actually very interesting, guys, because if there are some other areas that you are interested on, like you are so into technology, that you are so into, social development project, initiatives or whatever, project management might be a road, a path to get there as well. So if we are very strong in the other fields, we might be able to lead those teams as well, which means that if you have the chance to lead a team in a completely different industry, well, the most obvious thing would be to read more and to know more about that industry as well. But anyways, it's like we do have the possibility to participate in different projects. So guys, we just finished, but I'd like to know if you have any question, any comment about what we said today.
It's funny, but I think it sounds. Oh shoot!
What happened?
Sorry, I think it sounds like harder and harder to be a project manager with all the challenges and all this. I don't know if it is because it is like a crash course, so too much information, but it's like kind of overwhelming and exciting at the same time.
Well, the thing is that somehow, well, it's not, I wouldn't say it's hard or it's easy, but as you said, once again, I would go back to what we said regarding the skills the project managers should have, and why I believe, although the Project Management Institute states that perhaps the most important skill for project managers is communication. That's what they say. But I would also say that integration is very important. So the thing is that being a project manager means getting to work with people who are very different from you in lots of different senses, not just as people, but also professionally. So that is the actual challenge. I would say the actual challenge is to get the things done, to complete the project, working with people who are very different, you see, working with colleagues who are very different. So that was one of the challenges I had in 2018 when I was the technical lead of the project for the Ministry of Education. The project manager, she also had a major in languages, but then I was working with a finance coordinator who was a specialist on international relationships, and then the administrative assistant, he was a business administrator. So it's like we are working with people from lots of different fields. So you need to be able to communicate and work effectively with those people. That would be perhaps the most serious challenge, like to understand what you have to do and being able to work with people who are different. And from our view as teachers, as educators, perhaps the hardest part would be that, because when we are working in universities, when we are working in schools, we are working with people who are very similar, let's say. You see, so the kind of interactions we have is always the same. But when we are working on projects, remember that one of the challenges we mentioned, and one of the trends, actually, I think, no, was one of the challenges, I'm sorry. It's like, I don't know what I'm talking about. One of the challenges is like projects are cutting edge. So it's like we are always innovating. So that means that you need to be ready to get out of your comfort zone all the time, because you know that you will be talking and working with different people and doing things that perhaps you have never done before. So that's the actual challenge, that it requires us to be quite dynamic and flexible. And that's something that us as educators sometimes don't tend to do. We tend to be a little bit more static. We tend to do things the same way pretty much forever, you see. So when working on projects, that approach never works. So that's why we decided to call this first module the project approach, because the project approach has to do with that, with innovating, working with different people, getting the work done, thinking about the future, planning, anticipating risks, you see, protecting your team. So it's like you need to be super flexible. So it's like, it might be hard, of course. It might be hard, and even more a person like me who never liked mathematics back then in the school. But the point here is to be flexible, right? And communicate with others. That would be perhaps the most important thing. And I would say, yes, it is challenging because it requires us to do something that perhaps we were not trained to do. And that's why during the previous session, we talked about this, remember, is dromology. We talk about dromology. You say science and logic of speed. So it's like those of us who are more flexible, those of us who are faster assuming and adapting to changes are the ones who are going to be paid more basically in the future, you see. So that's why this is very serious and very complex, I know. But I know it's also because of the methodology of this course, because it's a crash course. So it's a crash course because you're supposed to crash, right? So actually, no, that's not the reason, you know it. But I know it might be a little bit overwhelming. But as we move on, I believe that hopefully we'll feel a little bit better.
Okay, I will trust in you. It sounds funny anyway. I mean, overwhelming could be funny sometimes.
I know, absolutely, yes.
And I will say, according to Mafa's opinion, I will say that also we are so lucky. I mean, apart from David and Wilfred, the youngest people in this group.
Wow.
We are so lucky because, just kidding. But we're so lucky because we're having this like training in this moment, and maybe it is also part of the experiences in which we are involved in different scenarios, right? So according to the experiences that we have the chance of facing in our jobs, or the roles that we are assuming in the different roles that we are having now or in the coming future, my effect or my perfilar nuestro perfil. I don't know how to say that. Like
Improve or
yeah,
somehow.
like enroll our profile. I will say that.
Yeah.
So I think that also it is a matter of experiences that we gain from the little things or the little chicharrones that we face every single day in our jobs that can be connected with the role of a project manager. Because if we analyze, well, this is what I do, and then I analyze this like a project manager must be deliberating different things, not only in the workplace, but also in real life,
Diversity.
right? So every single thing that you do in life also is a project, because at every
Yes.
single day is unique, right? So you're executing different functions, and you have to solve problems every day. You have to think about paying bills or how to gain money, you see. So it is something also about that. So don't feel
Yes, that
overwhelmed,
is,
Mafe.
that's absolutely true. And the thing is that talking about the market itself, it's like this is a very good moment. I mean, I agree with Paula on what she said. It's like this is a very good moment to have a look and know more about this subject, because actually I would say, if I'm not wrong, that perhaps despite what Paula has said, I might be perhaps the youngest project manager in the British Council right now. In my team, I am, but I don't know if in the rest of the organization, but most of the people I know is under 30, like 37 to 38, most of them. So this is an area in which lots of young people participate in, but it requires some time. You see, to get there, it requires some time. So for instance, in my case, the first time I had a chance to be a project manager was last year, you see, and I've been like working to get here since I was like 25, 26, more or less. So that's something that takes some time. But the good thing is that you guys have been talking about that. You know more about the foundations, the basics. So if in the future you actually decide to advance your career in that field, as Paula said, you will have some previous knowledge and some experiences on that, and that's going to help you a lot, because at least you know what a project is, and that's quite something. See, if you know what are some of the basic characteristics of a project, that's going to make a huge difference. Absolutely, yes. So yeah, I believe this is a very good moment to talk about this. So yeah, basically yes. Anything else, guys, you'd like to say? Now, just want to leave, right? Okay, so for you guys to leave.
No, you
So
were
this is
about to recommend reading, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
for this coming week.
Yeah, this is the reading I'm recommending. It's just like 3 pages, but this book is actually really cool, and this is the book that I will share with you. It's called The Absolute Beginner's Guide to Project Management. It's a really good book for people like us, people who just want to have a little look at this thing and to know the basics. And when we finish this course and you have the chance to read this book in detail, you will know the basics, believe me. You will know a lot by then. So it's actually a very, very interesting book. So this is the reading I'm suggesting. So what are the topics that are covered there? So it's already in the same place where I put the other one. So basically, you will read a little bit about the qualities of successful project managers. So this is like an extension of what we just talked about. Also, 15 common mistakes of project managers, you see? So I'd like you to read about that. So it's basically 2 different topics: qualities of successful project managers and 15 common mistakes of project managers. And that's how we're gonna be talking, how we're gonna start talking, the next session, in which we will start talking about tools. So this time, also, just to answer what Mafe said, it might be quite overwhelming because we try to cover a lot in just 2 sessions. We wanted to talk about projects, project management, and project managers. So it's like we were covering 3 super big themes or topics. I'm sorry. So of course that might be overwhelming. But now, starting next week, we're gonna go we're gonna go over specific tools and specific tasks that we as project managers do pretty much every time. So that's gonna be different, because this is not just the theory or the topics or the challenges and the problems and so on, but it's more about the actual things we do on a regular basis, and that we love doing so much, believe me. Okay, so guys,
Yes.
any comment, any question, any, you know, like,
Now I'm going to be
requests,
able
whatever?
to sleep. Like I'm calmer now. Thank you, guys.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good news. Okay, guys, so we just made it through the first module of our course. So we are missing just 7 modules more. So hopefully we're gonna get there as well.
I have a question regarding this.
Yes.
And are we going to set up product at the end of the course, or is
Yeah,
just
I had the
like
same
an
question.
exercise of understanding and reflecting? How does it work?
Okay, so those of you who have
This.
that question, thank you very much for ignoring me when I presented the course.
My gosh,
You
sorry.
said that
Because-
we're going to. I forgot. Like there was an idea. Like the idea is that we kind of laugh.
You got it.
Maybe things that
Here
we.
it is.
Okay.
So
Yes,
I assume
yes.
that day you guys were like, yeah, lo que tú digas, me parece genial.
Ah,
muchas
of
gracias.
course not. Yeah,
We were
I
not.
had
That
to finish
I
mine.
feel like Mafe in this moment, overwhelmed.
Because I was trying to do my best to try to
Oh my
convince you about the course, and you were like, sí, lo que tú digas, dentro de 8 días nos vemos. And I was, okay, thank you. So okay. So yes, we're gonna do essentially 2 things. We said the theory of change, which we were talking, we had a little meeting with Sebastian earlier today. So there it is, the theory of change. So we're gonna work on that theory of change. And then a pitch document, which is a document that contains the theory of change and a couple of tools more, in which you guys will have a very interesting summary of a project. So I'd like you to think about that, guys. Think about any project you've been working on recently, or it could be a different, like completely brand new idea that we could use as a example for this, you know, activities we'll do later. Okay.
I have a question. At some
Yes.
point, are we gonna share this, let's say, slides with someone, or just to let people know that we are working on something, just to refresh our fan pages? And that would be great, I would say so, but we need to
Yeah, I don't
consider.
remember who, but somebody also said that last week, and we said we should have a discussion on that, because it's not just about, yeah, let's share everything, but like why and with whom. So perhaps in the next meeting we have, like the monthly meeting we have, we can discuss that. That could be a topic for discussion, like if we should share this and how. So that would be very interesting as well.
And that meeting is going to be